getting people to, hey, so we're live now. Okay, so yeah, let's just wait for some people to hop on.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Matthew, I don't know if you want to do introductions while we're waiting for people to hop on, or after. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'm Matthew Nielsen, and I'll moderate the conversation here. We're going to talk today about the Hope Scholarship in Florida. It's one of several scholarship programs that the state of Florida has passed through legislation and is currently operating. It's currently available to students. This one in particular, we're going to have Ron talk us through, and Ron is our guest today. Ron Matus. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Matus.
Matus. Ron, I should have asked that before. Ron Matus.
Butchered many times, so that's fine.
Ron Matus is the Director of Policy and Public Affairs at Step Up for Students. And Corey DeAngelis is the Executive Director at EFI. He's the Director of School Choice at Reason Foundation and an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute. So coronavirus is taking up a lot of airtime nationwide. And so issues like this, the Hope Scholarship is one that's kind of getting buried or just lost in the mix and overtaken by news about COVID-19, which, certainly should get some airtime, but these things are important too. So we wanted to take a minute and talk with Ron. And I wonder, Ron, if you wouldn't mind just taking us through to start, what is the Hope Scholarship? Who's eligible? And just what are some of the participation numbers statewide right now?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the Hope Scholarship. I do think some interesting things have come to light recently that are important to talk about, but like you said, coronavirus, and rightly so, has drowned out just about everything else. But these other things are important too, including the Hope Scholarship and what the participation is like at this point. So the Hope Scholarship was created in 2018. The Florida legislature passed it in 2018, and then it was signed into law by then Governor Rick Scott. It was the brainchild of the guy who was our Speaker of the House back then, Richard Corcoran. He's now our Education Commissioner. Obviously, a very passionate supporter of public education and education choice. And I think he saw a need. We have tens of thousands of incidents every year of kids being bullied or involved in some kind of violent thing or another in district schools. These are some of our most vulnerable kids. In many cases, are actually being hurt. And this was a vehicle to give their parents an option if they wanted it. Some parents want to stay and fight, and that's up to them, and more power to them. I'm glad when folks do that, but there's some parents whose kids have been through so much, and they've been through so much that they want out, and they want options to go find someplace else that's safer. And that's what the Hope Scholarship allows them to do. I think there are about 10 or 12 different actual incident eligibility categories. I mean, there's bullying, there's battery, harassment, hazing, threats and intimidation, sexual misconduct, fights, things like that. I don't know the exact list of categories, but 10 or 12 of them. I think when the legislation was proposed in 2018, there was an analysis done, and it looked like 45 to 50,000 kids a year would be in those eligibility categories. An analysis found that they expected maybe 7,000 kids to use it the first year. And the numbers have been far, far below that. The first year, I think we had 127 kids actually get the scholarship and enroll in a private school. And this year we're up to 389 kids. So far, far short of what was expected. I guess I forgot to mention this. So it's funded by sales tax credits on automobile purchases. So when you go buy a new car or a used car, you can contribute up to $105 to the scholarship in return for sales tax credits. And so the money raising part has been going great. The first year we raised $40 million. This year we've raised, at this point already, I think it's slightly over $50 million. So there's plenty of money there for these scholarships, but there's not a lot of people applying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say this. I mean, this seems like a good idea. I don't see why there isn't, a lot more of these types of programs throughout the United States. I mean, if you ask parents why they choose private schools for their kids, a lot of the things they rank, safety seems to be one of the top of the things on the list, way above things like standardized test scores. So I'm surprised. I mean, I've heard other pushes for programs like this throughout the United States, but this is the only one that I know of, in Florida. And I'm also surprised that, there's only about 300 students taking advantage of this program when it looks like, let me pull it up right now. If you look at the pie chart for this on EdChoice, 83% of the students in the state that are, student age population are eligible for this program. So it makes me wonder, why aren't more students taking advantage of this? Ron, do you have any theories for why that could be? Is there information suppression going on, or is it, or are people just, not aware of the program? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the law as it's written says that it's up to the districts to notify the parents of bullying victims or any of the other incident categories that they have this option. And so, I want to be careful here because, we really work hard not to point fingers at districts, or do our best not to do that. But there was a report that came out recently from the Learning Systems Institute at Florida State, which was commissioned by the state to do a survey of the parents, the Hope Scholarship parents, and to get their take on the program. So this is also part of the law. Every year, the state has to hire somebody to do an evaluation of the program. LSI did this survey of the Hope Scholarship parents. Now, it was the first year parents, and so there wasn't a lot of them. I think 40-something parents responded. So small sample size, take it with a grain of salt. But what that survey found, amongst many things that it found, was the vast majority of those parents, more than 70%, did not find out about the scholarship from the district, even though the district is required by law to tell them. They found out through all kinds of other means, word of mouth, social media. In some cases, some private schools told them. In some cases, they stumbled on the Step Up website and found out about it. And so I think, that report tells us a lot. The districts, for whatever reason, and I try not to speculate here, but for whatever reason, they're not doing what is required by law, which is to tell the parents of the victims that they have this option.
And so this program isn't income targeted, right? It's just
No.
It's open to everybody. If your student's bullied, and I guess that 83% comes from you have to come from a public school, right? You can't already be in a private school. I guess that's the thing that makes it non-universal. Is this the report you were talking about?
Yes, that looks like the parent. That's the parent ratings of the schools their kids were. Yes, the whole thing's right. That one chart was the ratings that the parents had of their schools the kids were in versus the ratings of the schools that they got to once they got the scholarship. I should point out one other thing real quick. This isn't just a private school choice program. I mean, if a kid is eligible because they've been bullied or fall into any of these other categories, they can also go to another public school, if there's capacity, or they can even within their district, or they can go to an out-of-district school and get a $750 transportation scholarship. So I think that's important to add. This isn't just a private school choice program. It offers options in both public and private schools.
So I just did some quick math, Ron, and it looks like 71.4% of families that did participate in the program did not find out about it through their district school.
That's right. That's right. A very,
And the
overwhelming majority.
And the legislation says that the schools, that should be the primary source of that information getting to the families. Is that right?
That's right. It's very clear. Once the incident is reported, then the districts have to investigate, and then either at the conclusion of the investigation or within 15 days, they have to tell the parent, regardless of what they found, by the way, but they have to tell the parent, you have this option, and they have to give them what is called a hope notification form, so they can fill it out and turn it into the SFO and begin the process of getting a scholarship if that's what they want.
So Ron, in theory, if I'm living in Florida and my student is attending a public school, could I somehow get one of these scholarships for my child, even if there's not severe bullying going on, even if they just kind of, maybe they were upset at school one day? How stringent is the regulation or the law in determining, if you qualify for the program or not? Is it just, I feel like I was bullied today, therefore I get a scholarship, or is there actual hard evidence that has to be presented in order for that child to get the scholarship? Could you talk a little bit about that?
So there is no requirement that the incident be proven. So it could be, and this is one of the criticisms of the program for the beginning. Some people said, well, anybody could go and just complain and get a scholarship to get out. It does not hinge on whether there's evidence that this happened or not. From what I can tell you, I've talked to maybe a dozen Hope parents. I reached out to them randomly last year because I was kind of curious what's going on. So, before this report came out, and I heard the same thing. All these parents, virtually every single one of them said, well, the district never told me about it. Had I not stumbled by accident on this scholarship, my kid would still be beaten up. And there was a range of incident severity, I guess you could say, amongst the parents I talked to. And I think you'll also see that in report if you go through it, because there's enough details in there you can kind of tell. Some of these are kind of more garden variety bullying, the kind of things many of us have experienced probably when we were kids. But there's some that are pretty extreme and, very moving, just really horrible things. But, to your question, there is no requirement that that the district, find out for sure that there was evidence of whatever the incident complaint was.
So essentially, at least in theory, if nothing gets stopped in the future, this could turn into a bigger program than the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program, which currently serves 108,000 students. Based on eligibility alone, if there were enough, if there was enough funding from the vehicle funding source, could this program be bigger than any other private school choice program in Florida?
I don't think that's correct based on the statistics I've seen. So from what I understand, based on those, whatever it is, 10 or 12 incident eligibility categories, there's somewhere between 45 to 50,000 incidents in those reported incidents in those categories. So, that's a far smaller pool than the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship, which would be well over 1 million kids would fall under that income eligibility threshold. A far smaller pool than even for the McKay Scholarship for students with disabilities, where there'd be several 100,000 kids. So I don't think based on the incident eligibility categories now, that it could grow to be bigger than those programs.
But at least
if they were unreported, it would still, even if you were only capturing 25% of actual incidents because they just go unreported, you're still only looking at a couple 100,000 versus 1 million potentially for these other programs, the tax credit scholarship program, for instance. Go ahead, Corey, you had something.
Yeah, I was going to say, but if we're looking at the reports as they exist today, that'll be a smaller number than if we said, okay, well, what if parents started reporting these things at a much higher rate in the future? Theoretically, it should be that we could access a much larger pool of students than the amount of students who are, just based on eligibility threshold, that 83% that we saw at the EdChoice website. But I mean, that would be contingent on funding. It would be contingent on people actually, reporting a lot of stuff, whether it's going on or not. So yeah, I mean, but what really amazes me is just how small this program is. I mean, it's existed for not too long now, but we still only see 300 students. Around 300 students using the program. I would have expected it to be a lot bigger, and I would have expected other states to start copying Florida. I thought it was a great idea.
Let's dig in on that just real quick, because I want to make sure we get that right, Ron. What's the actual participation number? Because EdChoice doesn't seem to agree with FSU's report. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong. Maybe 300 is the right number and 127 is just first-year participants. What's the real total number of participants right now? Do you know?
So year one was 127, got the scholarship and enrolled in a private school. Year two, at the moment, it's 389 is our latest number.
Okay. So that's the difference. So this report is really just reporting on that first cohort.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so at some point they'll have to do, a second year report. So hopefully they'll get, more responses, and we'll be able to tell whether the same patterns hold true. I mean, I don't want to leap to conclusions, until they do their survey and we see the data. But based on the anecdotal information that I've seen, and again, I reached out, talked to a dozen parents randomly, and then I have friends, too, whose kids have been bullied, and I've asked them multiple times, well, did the district tell you after you complained that you had this? No, never told me. I'm like, well, if you want that option, you should ask, because you do have that option now.
So Ron, since the competitor, the district, is not providing a lot of information about their competition, which from an economic perspective, that kind of makes sense. Do you think there's some role for outside organizations to kind of step in and say, hey, look, this program is available? Is this kind of like, a role for Step Up for Students or EdChoice or other types of organizations, or maybe even Educational Freedom Institute would have a role in helping promote this message? And if so, is there a particular way you think is the best way to reach families to do that?
Well, that's a great question. So I do think there are many things that can be done to, one, raise awareness, and then two, maybe spur, prod, incent, I don't know what the right word is, districts to do what they're required to do by law. I mean, there certainly can be some publicity campaigns and marketing campaigns. We've done a little bit of that. We've got an excellent marketing team at Step Up. I don't know all the details, but I know they've done some of that, just like they do for all our scholarship programs. But they could ramp that up even more if they wanted to. I think other groups outside could definitely do that as well. For what it's worth, I do think, and I want to say this respectfully and humbly, because this isn't my lane, but I do think there's a place for policymakers who care about this program to use the bully pulpit, not intended, to raise awareness that, hey, it doesn't appear like districts are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I know the DOE last spring sent out a memo to the superintendents reminding them, hey, this is what you got to do under the law. Perhaps it's time for another one of those memos, maybe multiple memos, maybe other forums where this issue could be raised. I think, as cynical as I've become about the media, especially since my time at Step Up, I do think there's a role here. I mean, I don't know that the coverage was like, the most fair and balanced during the session when this thing was created. But for what it's worth, there's been a lot of attention in the aftermath. We've had a lot of outlets reach out to us and say, we'd like to do a follow up on the program. What's going on with it? Can you tell us the numbers? Can you point us to some parents who are willing to talk about it? And there's been a story or two or three, but there's no doubt that some outlets saw the numbers and went, it doesn't seem like there's much of a program. Well, if they knew that there's not much of a program, perhaps because the main mechanism to inform parents isn't being used, I mean, I'd like to think that they could be enlisted in this too. So I think all of those things could help, before perhaps revisiting the legislation might be necessary. I mean, it's
very kind, Ron. Have you noticed that? Corey, Ron's being very kind.
Oh yeah, Ron's a nice guy, obviously.
He's obviously a very nice guy. That's
good.
I
try. We try. I mean, it's not. We see ourselves and we see these programs as being part of public education. They're a complement to public education, just like all the other pieces are. And we try, I don't know if we get enough credit for this, but we really try hard not to pit one sector versus another. We're all in this together. Mm-hmm. And so it is a little bit of a sensitive thing for me to be on here or anyplace else saying, well, according to this report, the districts aren't doing what they should be doing. But
yeah, I mean, well, like you said, this isn't just a private school choice program. You can take this, you can use this program as a means to switch to another district-run school. And, like Matthew and I have been saying all along, school choice isn't anti-public school in any way. It's just pro-choice and pro-family. And, if someone doesn't feel safe in their school, they should be able to pick a different public school or a private school. The sector shouldn't really matter. And I think that's really the main idea of Educational Freedom Institute as well, that this isn't sector versus sector. It's all about choice, and it really doesn't matter what sector an individual chooses. I do
totally agree. If I could just add to that really quick, I mean, I balance my my reluctance to try to to even be remotely appearing like I'm pointing fingers at districts with the fact that these kids are the most vulnerable kids. Some of them are being hurt, really bad, and we can't forget that this program was created to help these kids and these parents get out of what, in many cases, are really bad situations. So, on the one hand, I don't want to cause any tensions or frictions. On the other hand, let's don't forget that these kids need some help and these parents want some options, and they deserve these options. They should not be in a learning environment where it's not safe for them. And, going back to the parents I talked to last year, I mean, some of them I talked to were pretty hardcore traditional public school supporters. They told me that. They said, I didn't want to leave the school. I'm a public school person. But it was a situation where my kid was not learning. His grades were dropping. He was experiencing, all kinds of, mental health issues and even physical issues that manifested because these problems weren't dealt with. And they finally said, look, I'm a public school person, but this is not working. I need something else. And so, sorry.
I totally see where you're coming from. And, I said this from the beginning. I think more states should have programs like this because, parents choose schools for tons of different reasons. There's multiple dimensions of school quality, and safety is one of the most important factors, that for parents choosing individual schools over other schools. And look, it's really hard to learn really well if you don't feel safe when you're going to school each day, and mental health is really important as well. And I think school safety plays into that a lot. I just released a report, a month or two ago in New York, looking at their charter schools versus their district-run schools. And, after controlling for differences in students, I found that the charter school sector was a lot safer than the traditional public school sector. And I mean, this is similar to what this Hope Scholarship program, found as well. Large improvements in safety as a result of getting to use the program as reported by the parents. So, I mean, no kid should be forced to stay into their residentially assigned school. if they don't feel safe there. And I know Florida has open enrollment, but not every state has that. And that makes an even stronger argument for this program, I think, in other states too, that the state government shouldn't be able to say, you have to stay in this school, even though you're telling me that you don't feel safe at school. I mean, this should be a guarantee in every state, in my opinion. And Florida is really leading the way here.
I agree. I like this. I wanted to make sure before, and you've been really generous with your time, Ron. We appreciate you taking some time this morning to talk with us about the program. This report, though, before we let you go, I want to take another look, if we can, Corey, at that chart and just go over. I actually want to say it out loud here. Ron, if you can walk us through the chart. We've shown it a couple of times, but I think it's worth actually explaining to some degree. Could you walk us through that?
Sure. My vision's getting bad in my old age, but I think this is the chart that shows the rating that the parents gave to the prior school and the current school. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, off the top of my head, what I remember is that the researchers at LSI asked the parents in the survey to rate their prior schools and their current schools on a 1 to 4 scale. And if I remember right, the on average rating they gave to the prior schools was about 1.8, and the ratings for the current school that they were able to access with the scholarship was nearly twice that, like 3.6, somewhere around that.
Yep.
I just remember it being nearly double. They rated the newer schools that they were able to access with the scholarship twice as high as their prior schools.
Yep, that's right. And so the 3 areas that they talk about, that they rated, were engagement, safety, and environment. And obviously this particular scholarship, because it's targeted toward those who have experienced bullying in their current school, at a district school, safety is number 1, right? I mean, you would think is their number 1 priority, because that's where they're experiencing deficits where they are now, or that it would be the impetus for them to leave the school. And so that one in particular is nearly twice, and 4 being the highest rating you can get. 3.6 in that category is pretty darn good overall, right? So, and again, the sample size is small, and so we have to make sure that that's well known, right? But for the respondents, but
another thing to point out there that I think is notable is that in the survey the parents were asked, well, how hard was it for you to find another school that met your needs, that you felt was a safe and going to be a good environment for your kid? And the numbers there were also very lopsided. It was more than 70% who said it was easy or somewhat easy to find another school. So if you give the parents the power to find options, they're going to find good ones.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to point out that this is a pretty, all these differences are statistically significant, even though it's a small sample size. I mean, it's like about 100% increase. A doubling is essentially a 100% increase. And it's pretty rigorous in that this is comparing the same students prior school to their new school. So we're not comparing different populations of students here, which I think makes it a rigorous study, because it's comparing your own school, the same student school to the new school, instead of comparing 2 different populations of students, which is, helps with the credibility of the study. And then this also matches a lot of the random assignment evaluations of private school choice programs. I think there's only 3 existing random assignment studies on this topic, and they all similarly find big increases in reports of safety as reported by parents and students. So this is just showing, this is mirroring the existing literature on the topic. But yeah, it's 11:30. I want to thank Ron for, giving, the time flies when you're having fun and talking to nice guys like Ron and Matthew. So yeah, I want to thank Ron for coming out and virtually meeting with us. Hopefully we can meet in person in the near future once all this stuff blows over.
That would be awesome.
Thanks for giving us all this, in-depth information about the Hope Scholarship Program, something that I've wanted to learn more about, and one of the programs I think other states should emulate as well.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much. Well, Matt, thank you. Corey, thank you. This was great. I'm so appreciative that you care enough about these things that you want to dig into them deeper and share that information with your audiences. If you ever got any more questions or need anything, just let us know. We'll help you out.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Have a good one.
Y'all take care. Bye-bye.